Good evening all. Welcome to the Municipal Elections Debate Night hosted by DIS, Lijsberta and Studium Generale. The elections are coming up 16th of March and the 14th of 15, thanks to COVID. My name is Twan de Nijs and I'll be hosting this debate tonight, or trying to moderate it at least, keep a little bit of control. In the past, I was a city council member myself for one of the parties on the stage tonight, STEP, which will be introduced later by Ida, I imagine. Of course, you might think, oh, that sounds like a very colorful moderator. This is true. It's quite common in politics. As many of you, I also have opinions of what happens in a municipality. And I hope that that actually will aid this debate to see where the points are and actually help the debate along a little bit if needed. But of course, if you feel like I'm going off the rails, I'm sure you'll start booing me. So just keep me in check. Just a brief explanation for this debate. We have 3 different statements already shared with the parties, so they won't be too surprised. They have some ideas of what they want to share with you. They'll present these ideas in a 1-minute statement, which they'll get to do in a random order. I imagine will be from left to right for the first statement. Who knows what will happen for the second? I might surprise them and actually switch it around. And once those statements have finished, I imagine they'll have been triggered by each other's statements. They'll have some points that they want to discuss. The floor will open and there will be an open debate between all 5 parties. Of course, you might also feel in the course of the debate that some of the points that are important to you to maybe decide your vote in mid-March that haven't been addressed yet in the discussion. We have an opportunity for you to speak up then. Julian will be keeping a lookout for questions in the room. I will as well. We have a nice orange box that you can speak your question into. It is a very sensitive box, so you have to keep it up high, speak into it clearly so everybody can hear you. And if there are still some doubts whether everybody can hear you, I'll repeat the question. So everybody will be aware of what you would like to share. I would ask you to please, once you've finished your question, your brief question, of course, not your essay, that you toss it back to Julian, so other people also get the opportunity to participate, and we don't get the box stuck in one corner of the room. Then I would now like to move to the more interesting element, apart from the rules and who I am. It's about who the parties are and who they are. And I would like to start with Brendan, our most recent addition.
Yes, my name is Brendan Analippu. I'm a 23-year-old mathematics student here from Delft. I was originally not supposed to be here today because our party leader, Sivan Maroof, would do it, but he unfortunately fell ill. But I was able to step in. I'm the number 7 of D66, or D66, the liberal progressive party that's also in the national government right now. And we've always been at the forefront of Delft politics, fighting for a greener, more liberal city.
Thank you, Brendan. Rinske.
My name is Rinske Wessels. I studied here at architecture a decade ago. I'm the party leader of the Green Left, GroenLinks, here in Delft. In Delft, we're at this moment the biggest party at the municipality.
Ida.
My name is Ida de Boer. I'm a student business administration in Rotterdam, but I started studying here in 2015, and I love the city so much, so I stayed here. And STIP is now the second biggest party, and so it's Students' Techniques in Politics. And we're a young, innovative and a progressive party who also find sustainability and very important, and that there's always something to do in the city.
Casper.
I'm Casper Kroes. I am a master's student at the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management, and I'm a candidate for the VVD, the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. And our party stands for liberty, equal treatment in equal circumstances, personal responsibility, and low taxation.
Jorrit.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me here. I think this is a very important event for English-speaking people. My name is Jorrit Treffers. I'm the second representative from Volt, and we are sustainable, inclusive, and we always will fight for progressive social solutions and European ideas.
Thank you all for your introductions. I think we can move right away to the first statement. Which is that the municipality should pay the bill for the energy transition in Delft. As you might know, there's an energy transition going on, and there are multiple levels of government interested in this and wanting to take steps. But of course, there are political differences in how we should approach this transition, and I believe that Brendan might want to show what he thinks. The floor is yours. The minute is shown on the screen. I hope there will be a big zoomer once you go over time, but I hope you don't, of course. Take the floor. The center is yours.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so obviously there's an energy transition going on. And as a green liberal party, we want to be at the forefront of this. And since Delft is this great innovative city, many of these innovations happening here in Delft can also be applied here in Delft. And as a green liberal party, that's exactly what we want. Obviously, this is going to cost money. And as you can imagine, providing insulation for your house, building a network for central heating in the city will cost a lot of money. And now the question is, who should be paying for this? Of course, there are some things that the government should pay for. There are things such as shared infrastructure. It's clear that the local municipality should pay for it. But there are many things that people should be able to do themselves. For example, solar panels. Those will cost you less eventually. Yeah.
Thank you, Brendan. That's a very lovely bell. I like it. Ginske, you're next.
Well, I take a paper with me because my English is, I have to practice a little bit again. It's a bit rusty, so I'm sorry for that. Well, I think that, as Green Left Party, we really want to be a front runner on the energy transition. However, that's not something we can do alone. We have to work together on it. So in the last decade, our party worked on being one of the main initiators behind the construction of the regional heat network to Delft. It's a very cheap way to get the houses with gas. We also looked at how we can generate sustainable heat and energy on a regional level, and we draw on an energy transition and zoning plan for the entire city. And we want to continue with these plans to translate it also to the really local level, together with each of you, encourage insulation and sustainable energy in all the houses. And of course, we want to build together a sustainable Delft.
Thank you. Ida's next.
It's a timer,
It will
or
start.
I get unlimited time, right?
No,
That's
no,
one.
no.
Oh, okay.
There, don't waste it.
So the timer is running. So the energy transition asks for action now. We cannot wait, because the longer that we wait, the more it will cost. And to be honest, everyone will need to pay its part. But the municipality should take a leading role in the energy transition. So we have to make it easier for people to insulate their houses, but also make it easier to place solar panels on the roof. But if you talk about working together, we're here at the TU Delft. And there are a lot of smart people here that make innovations. So we also have to invest in things like the Green Village, which is a place here at the TU Delft where there are no rules, no restrictions, so that we can work on these innovations to really help this energy transition to be fulfilled.
just within the time. Okay, Casper.
Thank you. The VVD fully supports the goal of moving to carbon neutrality in 2050. And we think that it should be done in an affordable, realistic method that leaves room for personal choice. We can keep it affordable by focusing on low-hanging fruit first, try to achieve as much limitation of the amount of carbon emitted with as simple measures as possible. We can keep it realistic by looking at proven ways of reducing carbon emissions and not following hypes. So being critical of all the measures we do and making sure that everything we do is actually effective. We can leave freedom of choice, making sure that there is, for example, competition on the heat network that's proposed. And by making sure that people are not forced to take a specific action, but rather are convinced and informed about all the different methods so they can make their own choices on how to reduce their emissions.
Jorrit, finally.
Thank you. Sustainability is on the core of the values of Volt. And it's also one of the core reasons that I wanted to join politics. Volt is a pan-European party, and we don't believe that we can fix this climate change by only thinking within our own borders, our national borders. We have to look bigger than that. We propose an audit court that will test the municipal policy on its effectiveness. And next to that, we should all work together to lower our energy use. How should we pay for that? Now, the European Commission has 750 billion euros, which of 37% we can use. In the Netherlands, that comes to 2 billion euros we can actually invest in this climate change. And we should test the municipality on that.
Okay, thank you. As you might have noticed, everybody had still plenty left to say, so I see a finger. Ida.
Yeah, I have a question to Volt. So Volt says there's a lot of money in Europe. Well, I've also, the last period, we've seen that there's a lot of money in Netherlands, but there's almost never enough money in a municipality that we get from the Netherlands or from Europe. So does Volt want to wait for this money, or what does Volt actually want to do in the municipality right now?
Well, thank you for this question. And I think we all know that the municipality doesn't have a lot of cash, especially in Delft. The EU Herstelfonds of Corona, they are 750 billion euros. And 37% has to be used for the environmental change. That would be 2 billion euros in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, however, is the only country in the EU that hasn't yet filed its plans. To make those plans, we have to talk to municipality. And we at Volt say, think European, act local. So if once we get this money, this huge amount of money that we can get from the EU, only by asking for it, by showing our plans, then we can actually use that money, and we don't need the municipality to pay for this great cost, because the EU will do it. There's a lot of money available.
I see Casper thinking...
The issue is that this is all on the national level and on a European level, that this needs to be done. It's not relevant for the work we do in the City Council at this moment. And I think it would be more relevant to talk about specific measures we're taking. For example, I heard the Green Left mentioning the heat network from Rotterdam, which of course sounds like a great plan, but the costs are pretty high, especially for individuals. And there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. And my worry and my question also for the Green Left is, are you not afraid that with all the controversy and the high costs related to the heat network, are you not worried that this might also remove support for other green measures that you might want to take?
Well, I think that the pipe that comes to Delft, it's a regional investment, so it's not a local one. And that's not going to the individuals. So the local networks that we will build in Delft, these are the parts that are in the investments we need to make there. And the effect you have on getting this pipe here is that you get a much more, you can distribute the heat much easier to all the different houses, which makes it also thereby making the cost lower, and also it's also more effective. So you don't need to have the houses already completely isolated to the maximum level at this moment to be able to disconnect already a complete neighborhood from the gas, and then little bit by little bit isolate it, get that temperature lower, and then go to the next neighborhood. So it's really, you can produce mass amounts.
Yeah, but the issue first there is in that you actually need to connect a whole neighborhood, which is easy to do when it are high-rise buildings, which are owned by a number of investment companies who own these buildings. But when you're also talking about houses owned by people, that means you're forcing them to make changes to the house, to quit using gas, and to take up all the costs that are related to getting connected to
well,
these
I think
grids.
that's how you frame it, because I don't think you need to force people. I think you make an interesting offer, which makes it interesting to make that step.
I think Brendan wants to step in.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that this is a false contradiction, since you're not looking, it's easy to be against everything. It's easy to say it must be cheap. It's easy to say it must be like the most green measure there is. You have to be realistic about this. We see in recent times, we are very much, let's say, in the hands of Russia for our need for gas, which is quite recently has become clearly a problem. We need to make this transition, and just focusing too much on the prices will stall us and only will kill our ambitions. Our party says we need to be down by 60% in emissions by 2030. Stalling in this way won't get us there.
Yeah, I quickly want to react on the frame, and then I saw that Ida also has an answer. Where we don't want to stall, we acknowledge the issues that are there, but we think that it's better to look at small-scale implementations like having a completely electric fleet for the municipality, make sure that the municipality itself is net neutral, investing in electric infrastructure for cars, instead of taking up high and big risky projects.
No, but this is really like low-hanging fruit, and I think everybody wants to go for this low-hanging fruit. This is not a choice that's actually up to debate. The three parties over here already in the City Council are all really for this, but now the next big step is transitioning away from natural gas, and this heat network is the way to go. So this is not really, I think, I'm sorry to say, but this is honestly a false contradiction.
Jorrit.
Yeah, and I would also say in your electoral program, you're aiming for 2050 energy neutral. I studied in Sydney, and I flew out the moment, it was a couple of months before Corona, the moment we all remember the videos of Sydney being completely red by fire all surrounding Sydney. This year we saw the floodings in Maastricht and in Limburg. I think it is way too late. It's maybe years too late to talk about low-hanging fruit. It's maybe years too late to talk about not saying you should make this transition. No, we have to make this transition all together because, well, the world is in desperate need for it.
Well, I think I can confidently say that we all agree here that the planet is very important. The only thing that we add to that by giving these boundaries of making sure it's affordable, it's realistic, and people have room for their own personal choice, is make sure that we get the people along with us in.
But what is realistic? I think that is the question you're putting up here. Because what we think is realistic is that we now move forward fast. Because if we don't do it now, we can only tell our children this is the last generation that can live here.
But
so the VVD also said that they're a party, I think, for good finances. But don't you agree that the longer we wait, the more expensive everything will get. And do you really believe that by making vehicles electric and environmental friendly municipality building, do you think that that will really solve it?
Well, we can all have big dreams here, but the Dutch National Bank actually did research on what does it cost, for example, for everybody to isolate their, insulate their houses. This costs 20,000 euros per house. On average, people only have between 5,000 and 12,000 euros available. So if you take big steps like this, you're forcing costs on people who cannot afford it.
But don't you think there's a difference between costs and like investments that will pay off on the long run? And if you don't pay these, like the insulation now, it will only get worse?
We will always be in support of plans for which there's a good financial plan. So if there are investments that will pay off, we don't have any issues with them.
Jorrit.
Can I say, I think Casper actually does have a very good point talking about how to finance for people that cannot actually pay. A good example would be sunroof or zonnepanelen? Solar panels, yeah. And how it now works is that if you want to get subsidized from the government, then you have to pay for the solar panels, then you can get your ticket and you say, well, I got the money, right? So now I can get your money. There's a lot of people that don't have the money to make that initial purchase, and we should also think about that. And that's why Volt also thinks about a way to maybe digitally or very clearly show all the options there is for people that actually want to make this transition but don't have the money for it.
Well, I think that we can probably work together with Volt on that point then, because part of our plan is also smart subsidies to nudge people to also make the investments they need to do and to keep into account the financial situations of people in making these steps. So I think we can cooperate there.
Yeah? Okay, I think that is the financing point that we've been speaking about a little bit. I'm not sure whether anyone would like to bring up another point where they were brought by this statement.
Well, what I think you also started off with is that there are a lot of people who don't exactly know how they can insulate their houses or what they could actually do or what the rules are. So things that STIP also really believes in is that we have energy coaches. And energy coaches, they go to your door and they really explain what you can do to make those changes. And we also wrote an resolution, een initiatiefvoorstel, to make it also easier to actually make your house more sustainable and to reduce the amount of rules, because for a lot of people one of the main barriers is also that it's just too complicated to actually find out what you can do or what the costs are. So we believe that we should, as a municipality, reduce all the barriers that we have in hand to make the energy transition as easy as possible for everyone.
So there seems to be a lot of agreement on stage. Where do the parties believe that the main differences, aside from the financing discussion that we had previously, what is the difference that we should really speak about here?
I think I'm seeing with a lot of people that we all see the importance of this this conversation, and I think that for most people of our generation, it is a very important subject. And I also, when I talk with people that believe in Volt, it is very much one of the core reasons. And I think that it's very good to see that we all think about this as something that we should work the hardest we can for.
I think the primary differences are in like which priorities do you have, what do you do first, and which limits, which scope do you put on it. But I think every party here recognizes that we do need to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Yeah. So the goal is shared.
I think For most parties, it would be carbon neutral in 2040, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so almost 2050.
So in the room, is anyone curious about the standpoints? I see a question in the front. Remember speaking to it closely.
Hello. My voice is a bit gone, so sorry for that. But I was wondering, what are the differences between D66, D66, Green Left, and STIP? Because I know you're all in the same coalition in Delft, but what are the differences?
Who would like to start?
I can start. Yeah, to start off, I am a student myself, but what I really like about my party, D66, is that we don't only look at students, but I feel like STIP sometimes really focuses a lot on students. We also want to focus on changing, for example, insulating not only student houses, but all social housing. This also benefits students, obviously, but I think the reasoning is the other way around, where we really want to fight for people that are in a disadvantageous position in the society. I think Volt or STIP focus a bit more on students to begin with, and then sees there are a lot of other problems we could tackle as well.
I think that's an invitation to Ida to respond, and then we'll let Rinske answer the question as well.
Well, I totally disagree, but that's good. No, I think what STIP stands for is I think the power of innovation and also being pragmatic, so that we, with every new subject or theme, we are quite free in what we think, and we use the knowledge that we also have and the new energy that we have to make new motions. But if you see on our website and you see what we've accomplished, I think there is maybe 1 out of 30 things that has something to do with students. But if you look at privacy, if you look at culture, sustainability, also mobility, there are a lot of things that we do. So I would also invite you to look that up.
Of course, I've looked at it. And I didn't want to say, and I think I didn't say it, that STIP only focuses on students, but I think their point of departure is quite different. And also to clarify on like one other difference between the two parties, I think D66 is a bit more realistic, where, for example, STIP has a point in their manifesto that says we should really build off of innovation in the city. We obviously also believe that, but where STIP says the municipality should invest as the first investor in a lot of startups, we are a bit more realistic in this and also focusing on things we can actually implement and not having 40 different types of innovative street lanterns.
I do think that's a difference that we do have, so that we focus also a lot of just, we don't, not everything has to have a proof of concept for us. Sometimes you just want to try something out and see if it works. And I think STIP takes a bit more risk with that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. But I think that's indeed a difference that we have.
Yeah, but okay. To be honest, I don't think we are in this luxurious position, because for every street lantern investment that doesn't work, we have to cut on spending in, for example, youth care. Delft is not in a financial position to be just quite giving money to every initiative, so I don't think, I think being a bit more realistic in our financial position is the way to go.
So that difference has been addressed, I believe. Rinske, do you believe there are any more differences that should be addressed?
Well, I think I want to move forward to another part of it. I think that Well, I think as Green Left, we really think that we have to move on with the energy transition, but the energy transition there's not one solution. So the heat pipe system is a really important one, but we have to look at the regional and at the local at initiatives like Deelstroom and the energy coaches, what was already mentioned, but also at an Eneco that invest together on getting the energy transition forward.
So just for some context, investing in Eneco, that's the profit from selling the Eneco shares, right?
No, there is also, if I'm right, Eneco is also investing in a heat system in the north of Delft. So these are also parties that invest in these kind of systems, and we should cooperate together with these. And we did already the last 10 years, so to say, and I think that's something we really, get it also done, not only talk about it, but get it done.
Okay, and just to clarify, okay, yeah, Dorit?
Well, I think Rinske is saying a very good thing, actually looking at different solutions and all combining them together. And what we as Volt actually try to do, we have more than 300 city teams all over Europe. And we believe that we don't have to invent the wheel all over and over again. Like you said, you have to experiment. That's part of innovation. But at the same time, there's 300 city teams all over Europe that all have similar problems. And we think they maybe have had them 10 years ago and found a solution yet. And we as Volt want to implement that knowledge, that European-wide knowledge in the City Council.
Well, I can tell that our... how is it called? Wethouder? Elderman. He participated on this subject specifically, not only on local and regional level, but also on European level. He did a lot to connect the dots. So that already is happening.
That would be perfect, so let's work on that together then.
Definitely.
Well, I think there was a question, differences between STIP and GroenLinks or D66. Oh, and one thing that I think STIP is a bit different than these parties is that we find it very important that in the city for entrepreneurs, it is as easy as possible to make things happen. So that's why we're also for less bureaucracy, and sometimes also more the mindset of not like be more open to new initiatives and not be too strict. And for example, something that was also in a municipality council 2 years ago, I believe, was that in cafes here in the city, if you want to play music, you can only do it a few times a year. And we wanted to make it a bit more, and these parties a bit less. So I think there's also a difference in, the space or that we want to give to entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone feel? I see 2 questions, 4 questions. Maybe the ones that are more difficult to see for me, make them part of the discussion.
Thank you very much. I was waiting a little bit for it to be addressed, but none of you mentioned the big emitters or the big users of energy within our municipality. And I think there's a good example of the gemeente of Zeewolde last year with the data center, that it turns out that the municipality has a very big role in getting a data center somewhere, and then the national politics cannot avoid it anymore. And I think I want to ask, sorry to say, but the usual suspect, the VVD here, what they think of it and how they can avoid such situations. And also, of course, the other parties. But I think, like everybody said, we should not cut households, etc. But I think if you don't address this, then it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you for your question. Casper?
Oh, yeah.
You don't get to play with the box.
I think the person next to me could also answer this very well. Big companies are regulated under the emission trading scheme. And under the emission trading scheme, they already have their own targets and they already need to reduce through that scheme. So they already need to work on reduction. As a municipality, we don't have that much mandate to mandate carbon reductions from them. But especially with recent cuts in the amount of emission rights there are there on a European level, companies like this are already forced to reduce quite a lot and will need to reduce even more over the coming years.
And luckily, we don't have any space for a data center. If we had more space, we would build probably houses.
The houses or places or locations where people can work. That's also very important.
Yeah, but I do want to add on this because I think that the municipalities have become more and more a sort of like executive branch. We have to really look for the political choices we can make. And one of such choices is where we as a municipality can have policy on which type of companies we want to lobby to get to Delft. One such example would be, for example, we can choose, do we want to have a main office of Shell in Delft, or do we, for example, want Royal Haskoning, which is now coming to Delft, which Delft is lobbied for. So I think we have to be a bit more creative in the spaces of policy we can steer these transitions into. And this is one such a great example we do have.
Okay, I believe there is space for one final response to this statement.
Well, I was born and raised in Zeewolde for 18 years. So, and I completely agree actually with what most of you said. I think we should think about what kind of companies we want to attract and very seriously consider the climate change part in that decision. And we should also talk with higher level of governance to make sure that they also do their part and, well, help this kind of energy users.
If I can develop a bit more on this topic.
How short can you keep it? 2 sentences.
Yeah, we also want to focus on that primarily by having companies that are developed at the TU Delft, having locations to actually build their companies in Delft. Nowadays they're very often moving to Rotterdam or somewhere else. We want to keep those innovations here in Delft, and part of those will also be green innovations that are developed and invented here that then also can be produced.
Yeah. Okay. As you might notice, the speakers on stage are not yet done with this statement. We might return to it later. But as you might have read in the announcement, there is more to speak about tonight. So unfortunately, we do have to move to the next statement. If you feel like your question that you still had hasn't been addressed yet, just keep it for the end of the debate or approach the candidates afterwards, and I'm sure they're happy to answer your questions. But now it's time to move to the second topic, which is the history of Delft. Delft is an old city with many different events, and as many places in this country, that means that you also think about what Delft did in a certain time. And I'm sure all parties have thought about this already. It's been a topic of recent discussion. And I would like to invite Jorrit to do the first statement.
Thank you. Well, Delft is an international knowledge city, and I think international values have to be connected with that. And some of these international values are equality and justice. And I think if you look at, for example, the Delft Canon, we don't do justice on its whole Delft history. We do justice on one viewpoint, and that's a white viewpoint. So, thinks that we should look again to the history of Delft. We should think about what it has done for nowadays, but also what it has done in that days. And we should rethink our view and maybe adjust the Delft Canon to look at a wider perspective of history.
Thank you. I think the timer might reset because it was very quick. Okay, Caspar.
Yeah, thank you. The VVD is very much in favor of equal treatment in equal circumstances. And we think that the best example for this can be found in our constitution, which was originally written by Dutch liberals. And our first article says that people should be treated equally in equal circumstances. It also prohibits discrimination. And we think it's very important that there is no space for discrimination and that people have all opportunities to be who they want to do. In that regards, we think it's important to look to our history and to learn from it, but we also think that if we want to solve the issues regarding diversity that we primarily look at now, it's better to look towards the future. It's better to make sure that there is no space for discrimination, that discriminatory practices are tackled effectively, and that we focus on what we can do today to make the situation for people today better.
Thank you. Ida.
So I don't know if any of you guys know Slagerij Leo van Vliet. Opposite from it, there's this huge round sort of object, and that object actually tries to address the colonial history that we have. There are skulls in there, and it's black, and it is actually one of the art pieces in Delft that we have, or the art piece that we have in Delft that addresses this colonial history. And we should not hide that our colonial history was very, very bad. And SIP also believes that we should do this. But we also believe that we should do this together with, for example, the University of Leiden, who has a great history department, or with partners throughout the city that are very interested in looking into this more. And next year there is 150, I have 3 seconds. I'll come to it in the...
Rinske.
Well, we stand for an accessible, inclusive society in which everybody, regardless his origin, religion, orientation, political opinions, economical background or limitations, feels welcome and safe. We stand for a society where everybody matters and is able to participate. For a long time, we as a nation ignored the dark pages of our past. GroenLinks takes the responsibility of slavery of the past in Delft, and we believe it's important for our society to recognize the slavery past and the crimes against humanity. We have to reframe this history. My colleague Geraldine, who's sitting there from GroenLinks, organized together with the political party of D66 and ChristenUnie 2 talks with people in the city. And this resulted in the idea that in 2030 there will be a commemoration year of 150 years of abolition of slavery.
Thank you. Finally, Brendan.
Yes, thank you. And this is a statement my party definitely agrees with. It is clear to all of us Delft has had a bad history, dark to say at the least. And we as a progressive party want more than just simply to address it, as some of the other parties have already stated. Addressing is not enough anymore. We need to make an end to racism and discrimination in this whole country, but especially in Delft. And we as a municipality have a role to play in that. First of all, we need to have scientific grade research done on the history of what has happened in Delft. Not only because it's important to look into the future and to make credible statements about what you want to change, but also to do justice to the past that has happened. Thank you.
Short and clear. Who would like to respond? I see a finger. Ida.
Well, I just wanted to add also what Rinske said about like next year being the 150 years that slavery was abolished. I think that's a great chance also for us as a city to take responsibility and to organize events to really educate everyone about what has happened. Because I think that is also a role that we have now as a municipality to educate people about our history. And also something that STIP believes could be a part of that is, for example, like walks through Delft, where you can also read more about, for example, standbeelden. statues and what they really people did. Or for example, if you have the Zeeheldenbuurt, that's actually not really from this time anymore, that they are pictured as people who have done great things while they were actually horrible. So that's something next year will be a really great chance.
Definitely, if I can take over, because I think Geraldine explained me that in these meetings that were held, there are a lot of people that are already joining and discussing about what kind of activities can be organized, movie nights, discussions, and also the Studium Generale organized last year 5 lectures already about this subject. So there's also, if any of you find this subject interesting to join, please after the talk to Geraldine, because she's really getting all the ideas together with the other parties to also help together work on this subject.
To add on this, I've also been personally involved helping Geraldine and some of the other people really pushing this. But I'm still stuck with the question to stip on this. We really think it's important, not only important, but necessary to be able to make a credible, to make any statement or educate people credibly about what has happened in the past, that we need to have a research. That we need to have some scientific research on this topic. And I don't understand how STIP can say on the one hand, it's important to educate people and stand and think about this next year, but still vote against, or not vote, but move against this research in the committee debate.
Well, I was doing that debate, and we are not against research, but it's more about, like, you were just talking about the financial situation that we are in right now, and the piece that was discussed, it was talking about 100,000 euros on scientific research, and I would rather work together with people from the city or a university and do it that way, because I do completely agree with you. I also think you cannot make an excuse for what you did if you don't exactly know what you did. So I think we're on the same page for that, but I think we have to think in a way how we can make that possible.
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot of people from the city actually want to join and participate, for example, the museum or the theater. And one of the outcomes of those talks was that money should not be the issue in this. Delft has made as a municipality a lot of money from our past, and it's true that we don't have that much money to spend now. But if you really want to make this a priority, there are other ways. Talking about like 100,000 euros is not something we can really spend on the fly, but there are ways in which we can do it without that much money. So I would love to work together on this. I see you nodding, so it would be great to work together on this in the next 4 years. Yeah. Great.
Wouldn't, just as a question, wouldn't it make more sense to use this energy that apparently is there both within the City Council and within the society to focus more on current day issues and lack of equality and opportunity that exists nowadays?
Yes, definitely. And one of the ways in which you can do this is by looking at the past. There are so many examples of pain from history that are still working through in this society. Geraldine told me about this. People for example, from Suriname or the Caribbean areas, they don't dare to look people they respect in the eyes, because it's a thing from respect. But in our society, it's really appreciated if you make eye contact with people, and it shows that you are like on the same level. You have respect for each other. But those cultural differences actually stem from slavery. So it is important to look into the future. But I say we can only do that credibly by looking into the past.
And
I agree.
Maybe a way that you can bring, sorry, I didn't see you over there, but bring those two things together is, for example, celebrating Ketikoti now. And I think the municipality already said that they want to do that, but I think that's a way where you can sort of look at the past, but celebrate a way of moving forward together.
I think what the difference is that we now have a very weird view of our history. It's not correct. It's only one way, seen one way. For example, the Zeeheldenbuurt. It's talking about heroes that have done terribly things. And I think Volt's standpoint is not to erase those ideas, those city and street names, but to put them in context, to show everybody what they were and what kind of things they did, good and bad. I think that way we can learn from it and actually also proactively think about how to do better. And one very good way to do that is we are now trying to build more and more houses, and we see this city, this street names being connected to colonial history. Might not be, it might be a very good idea to actually name new streets to people from the other side of the history, that we can actually also think about those, so that we show a whole picture of the history within its context, and not only our history that made our beautiful Delft, Oude Delft and whatever.
Would like to respond? Who would like to address another issue, part of this debate?
Well, I have a question for Casper as well, because he was talking about only addressing things in the future, but don't you think that you should also really think about the past, or how do you see that?
What we would be afraid of, and what you see in other countries going on, is that they actively try to remove history from the cityscape. We would be against that, because you can't deny your own history. But the things you mentioned, like contextualizing, etc., don't go that far. And yeah, because of that, we don't really have an issue with it.
But I think they go further than wiping it out. I think that's a very bad idea, because in that way we cannot actually learn from the mistake we've made in the past. And I think having these statues, these different ways of remembering our mistakes, that can actually very much help not doing the same kind of mistakes we did back then. So I would agree, not wanting to wiping it out, but I think it's very important to emphasize on the context and do that on different skills. Like I said, street names, but also maybe a permanent exposition. In the Prinsenhof, for example, Prinsenhof is very much focused on history. And it is a very important history of Delft, also the slavery part.
It is in the museum, in the rebuilding of the museum, a part of it will.
Is it permanent yet?
No, they're working on it. That in the new, after the reconstruction, a part of it will.
Very happy to hear that.
So good idea.
No. Do I see any fingers? Otherwise, I'm going to look into the room. Think. Okay, Geraldine is eager to.
It's like in reaction to what Casper said.
Could you bring it up to your
sorry.
face?
Okay.
Or just bring it up to your face.
Oh, I thought I had a loud one. Anyway, it's a reaction to Casper. I remember the first presentation with the City Talks. I started by explaining the philosophy of Sankofa. And Sankofa is this mythical African bird. And the bird looks to the back in order to go back into the future. So it needs to go to the past and get the golden egg, which is the knowledge, and move into the future. And if you don't do that, you don't have a base. You don't have a base to educate people. You don't have a base to change their thought. You don't have a base to move forward from. You know, like we all heard the stories of what's happening with African and Jamaican students in Ukraine. You know, you cannot imagine that during war, people can make time for racism and discrimination, right? So that means that you need to pull through and dig deeper in order to take that out of the minds of people. And by moving into the future just like that, from without a base, you cannot accomplish anything.
Yeah, I can agree on that. But if you don't start also looking at the future and taking steps now to make a better future and only look backwards, you're not making any progress. Yep. So there should also be a look to how can we reduce discrimination, which issues still exist, how can we tackle these in a pragmatic way so that we make the lives in a real and realistic sense better for people nowadays. And only looking backwards is then also not the solution.
We've been doing that in the Netherlands for the past decades, and it didn't really accomplish what we want. So there's many programs, but we need to go back to the past, reset the past, reframe the past, and again, just like, I think, I forgot your name?
Jorrit.
Yes, you said that we need to look at the different perspectives, because don't forget, the history was written by not the ones that were suffering from this past. So the history was written by this idea of we are heroes. So we really need to change that view.
And I think if I could add something, something that Imane from Volt Rotterdam told me today, I think it's also very important to think, to not put the white history and the black history or whatever kind of perspective against each other. You see that very often, that they have a slavery department in a museum. No, it's all connected with each other. They were interacting with each other, and also that part of the history is a very important one, and actually that made a lot of influence on what we are doing now. Like you said, with cultural differences, it's very important to also show the clash between, or the connection between those.
Okay. Any other questions in the room? I saw some other fingers. One in the back, but a very high lift. No, way more in the back even.
Okay.
That's why I don't play basketball. Okay, so I hear a lot of discussion here about raising awareness of the past, and I'm wondering why the ambition isn't to increase accountability for the past, because awareness has been a focus for the last decade, as you said so well, and it hasn't really led to change, a lasting change in the present, nor has it been able to lead to lasting policies that look into the future. Because I see that you were all talking also about using the past to improve the present and the future, but awareness hasn't really made a big difference so far. So my question is, why are we not talking about accountability and using the past to encourage that, especially among Delft students as well, but also the people directly related to students, the people who are most likely to affect equality amongst people?
Who would like to respond? Brendan.
I would like to respond, yeah. I think we are, one of the reasons we are definitely I think we're not yet at the point to talk about accountability. We first really need to be aware of what has happened in the past. And as I said before, in Delft we know some bits and pieces. We know, for example, that the municipality had played a big role. It was a large shareholder in the slave trade, but we don't know how widespread it was. There is still so much of the history we do not know at all. And to be, I hear sort of...
There's a feedback on somebody's mic. I'm not sure.
Okay, sorry.
I'll leave you. Maybe that helps. Maybe.
But before we are able to really get to that accountability level, we really first need to know what has happened. And I do agree, awareness in society is a step beyond being sure of the facts on a scientific level. And I think being aware in society and talking about accountability, those two can be rolled out in parallel. But yeah.
Yeah, I think you also... I think if it would just be a symbol, like an excuse, without really knowing what it is, I don't think you would really do
justice. Yeah.
Justice, yeah. I think
it wouldn't be credible.
No, I think it would just be a symbol, and I think it might even be worse if you would do that. And yeah.
Another question. Is the box nearby? Where is the box?
Yeah, it's here.
Ah, the chief thrower has it. Nice. Almost got
thanks.
there.
So I might say that this is the very first time I actually hear that Delft has a colonial past, and this is exactly what my question is about. So I've been living in this city for already 1 year and a half now. I'm an international student. I'm not the kind of student that just stayed in his room and that was it, just studied. I'm the kind of student that really want to get to know about the history of Delft, the Netherlands and so on. And yet I feel like I know almost nothing about Delft. And in my situation, I think there's 99.99% of the international students, because they come to Delft, they study, they spend most of their time on campus, and then they leave maybe to bigger cities in the Netherlands or other countries in Europe, and they still know zero almost about Delft and its history, colonial history, and so on. So I know we've been living in COVID times, so not a lot of events, but my question was for the municipality. So I think that's the GroenLinks and the STIP parties, because you are the majority right now in the municipality. Oh, sorry, this is, yeah, what were the plans, or like in what way have you tried to promote the history of Delft to students, to international students especially, and also what plans does everyone hold for the future? Because right now, this is a very big issue. There's a very big gap that has to be filled somehow. If you want to talk about colonial history, first of all, people need to know that Delft has a history, which doesn't really happen right now.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, to start with a response, the Prinsenhof Museum has a free day of the month that as a citizen of Delft you can go there. Sadly, they don't focus that much on this specific period in time. Mostly focus on the 15th, 16th century. But you can go to the Prinsenhof for free. I think it's the first Sunday of the month, but you'll need to double check the website.
I think also something that the municipality needs to improve on is also communicating more in English, because I think Delft is now very focused on just Dutch-speaking people. So I think that's maybe a first thing, if they also do their promotion about these things in English so that it's more widespread.
And I think it's also a question on cooperating more with the university together, because the university is also the best entrance for students to get the information from. So I think that's also something we can continue working on.
When I was in Sydney, I studied there for half a year, so I was also an international student, and they also have their own story of discrimination with indigenous people. And every class I started there started with, we now acknowledge the land of the indigenous people we stole it from. It's not a very concrete, we should do this on the TU Delft, but it is a way that their common knowledge, also on international students, during their type of OV that we all had there was an indigenous dance, and we could talk to indigenous people about the history. So, not per se concretely put here, but it's a different way of thinking and recognizing the past of the places that we were studying. And I think it's a way that we can learn from their way of treating this subject.
I have a question for you, because you were talking about the colonial history, but also just history in general. Do you find that it's also just difficult to find information about Delft, or was it just...
Yes, it's very difficult, and I feel the difference is, so for example, I'm doing a course in The Hague, and I have
I'll repeat it.
people there that like go to museums and try to find out about the history of the city and so on. It doesn't really happen in Delft. Like, all my friends are the type of people that are like outgoing and try to find out about the history of Delft, but I don't know where to find it. Like, one of my friends here was telling me that there is a museum in Delft where I can go, and it's the very first time I hear about that. And I would love to learn more about Delft, but I feel like a lot of people, yeah, they don't know that. It's very inaccessible right now.
So just because you no longer have a mic with you, I'll repeat it shortly. Just that you've seen in your own environment that very few people actually know that, for example, this museum exists, that you can learn about the history there. So you feel like this information could be shared better. Would that be a good summary? Thank you. Well, then we move to another question in the room.
Yes, thank you. If we look at it in a brighter perspective of city marketing, this will be the first investigation or research proposal we're going to start. It's a debate, so I would like to know which parties are for this investigation for this research proposal and which parties voted against or are opposed to it? Because there's a new election coming up. I think it's important. So I want to know, are you supporting this or are you against this?
Well, there hasn't really been a vote yet.
No. Your viewpoint, not the vote.
Oh, okay, right now. Yeah. I do really think that it really depends on the finances of it. As I said before, we are really in a very awful financial state. I do, however, D66 really prioritizes it. So even the numbers that we've heard from the talks in the city, those really make a lot of sense, and I think it's worth it to do it. For me, it would make sense to do it right now. Some parties have said already in the committee debate that the numbers they've heard, they don't want to do it, and some parties that are not here, not really fair to talk about them, but I'll still keep it short. They don't see it at all wanting to happen. So for us, it's really important to make it happen.
Would anyone like to add to that?
When it's the choice between this, putting more money into the housing crisis or youth care or care for the elderly, those things would quite easily get a priority. So that's not a definitive no from us, but there are other more pressing issues at the moment in Delft for us.
I think it kind of comes to prevention and repression difference in view. I think that in the long run, addressing these social injustices does pay off. So talking about like 50,000 euros, for example, does make a lot of sense if everybody's lifted up through it.
Okay. There's another question in the back. Oh, press the black button.
Question for me, yeah? Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I would like to support the ones in the panel who are very much more on the relation with the future and the present, because we've seen, for instance, in the United States, that this kind of debates, probably not here in Delft, but you can go really into kind of culture wars, and that more than divide us than unite us here in the Netherlands. And the other question to that is, how far ago do you want to go into the history? Because for instance, if we go to Roman times, we also have slavery there. So I don't think it's very constructive, very much, to look into that. And I would really far more try to focus on the present and into the future than relate to the past. So I would like to have the comments from the panel on that one.
Well, I think if there are still a lot of people that hold this grudge and that separates people from society, I do think you should address this. And I wouldn't go as far as looking into every detail, but we have to know a bit before we can really know what this grudge really is about, and looking what we can do or what we've learned from this. So I think ignoring it would create the biggest polarization.
I do agree that we should avoid from this issue escalating here in the Netherlands as badly as it did in the United States. But then again, the Netherlands is not the United States. So I think we can work through it in civilized debate and do it in a Dutch way, not in an American way. And I think everybody should stand behind that.
I think definitely we should go into it, because that it helps also to understand each other much better. And that's something we really need. We are now in need for that.
And I think the big difference is that we now feel like, well, most of my friends and I used to feel like history, but it's only one lighted view of history. And putting that context, understanding how our society works because of that history is, I think, vital for making a solution of the problem. And I think this discrimination, you cannot almost see it apart from the slavery era. And we have to deal with a lot of discrimination still in the Netherlands, and I think that if we don't look at slavery, we cannot solve discrimination.
Well,
Sure, if I can add just one little thing. Because this is a very interesting discussion.
Maybe make it the closing statement to this.
If anybody is interested, if anybody is interested into looking deeper into this, you can read the work of Gabor Mate, and Gabor Mate is talking about transgenerational trauma. So that's the same that children of Jewish families who did not partake into the war do not know anything about that. That's the same thing they sometimes feel. That's the same thing that Indonesian families feel, even though they have not been into the wars after in 1945. So the transgenerational trauma is something, if you don't deal with it, it will never go away. So you need to acknowledge pain, and it's not a grudge, it is pain. You need to acknowledge pain in order to go further in the future. Okay? So Gabor Mate.
Thank you, Geraldine. I think that's a good closure for now for this debate. Of course, everybody still has plenty to share. Once again, approach afterwards, and I'm sure this discussion or this conversation can continue. Then we're going to move to the third and final statement. In the meantime, I would like to invite the candidates to stretch a bit and maybe switch seats, switch it up a bit.
Leuk.
So I can quickly, you get very stiff on those awkward chairs. Let's move to the third and final statement, something that many of you are probably concerned about, which is housing. And since we're in the TU Delft, we're going to talk about student housing. And the statement for now is that TU Delft students should be able to reside in Delft. As the university has been growing quite a lot, this has become a challenge, and I'm sure there are different ways to approach this, which the parties will have thought about. I would like to invite Jorrit to start.
So, the Netherlands is facing a housing crisis, and in 2030 we have to build 1 million houses. And especially in Delft, this housing crisis has more parts than one. And one very important part is the international student housing crisis. I don't know if you've seen the documentary No Internationals Allowed. It was about the housing market in Groningen. And we see this announcement, No Internationals Allowed, in front of a lot of housing advertisement. And I think that's a very important issue. That's why we should focus on building for students in a mixed, so all over Delft, also in new building parts. And we should focus on student housing, also with shared accommodation.
Thank you. Ida.
As STIP, we talk a lot with students. And the main problem that they are facing, it's not to do enough in Delft or the bikes or the best bike roads, but it is finding a place to live. And STIP also finds it really important that students, when they come here in Delft to study, that they can also find a place here in Delft to live. And that is currently very difficult. So there are two things that STIP really wants to do. The first is to build more, but also shared, because now you can only see that there are a lot of studios that are being built. But the second thing that we want to do is to make it possible again to live together in already existing houses, because that has now been made impossible.
Brendan. Now you get to go.
Finally. This statement is for us a yes with a little bit of a no. I know I've been living in The Hague for the first year of my studies. Then I moved to Delft, and what a difference. So much nicer to be in the city, close to your associations. However, Delft is really small, and there are great housing opportunities in nearby towns. So we do want to build more student housing, like Ida said, for shared facilities. But also, we should really want to focus on housing in nearby municipalities. We want to work together with those municipalities. For example, municipality near us includes Delft-Gouw, which is only 2 or 3 minutes away from campus. We also want to be able, we also want affordable modes of transport to The Hague or Rotterdam.
Casper.
Yes, thank you. Well, as you might have heard already, we do have a housing crisis, and the best solution for that is building, building, and building. We as VVD primarily focus on 4 groups. We focus on students, focus on starters, we focus on young families, and we focus on the elderly. Regarding students, we primarily want to build here on campus, make sure that there are places here on campus, plus we want to make sure that campus is actually a nice place to live. So there is a supermarket already, but more cafes or other places to get together would be much appreciated. Focus on shared housing. And additionally, we also support the idea of working with other municipalities to take the tasks of building these student houses up together. But we also want to focus on houses for after you're done studying and maybe you want to stay in Delft. Because there are also not a lot of places available now to stay around if you have a job. So that's for us also a key point.
Thanks. Rinske.
Thank you. Well, the students, as my the other people already told, that it is not only in Delft but also in the cities around, because I think that's the most realistic way to approach it. The housing crisis not only among students. There's not enough affordable housing, also not for young people, so after studies to be able to enter. So it's, and also for elderly, it's also, there's not enough. So we should build for all the different groups so that there will be enough. And what we really focus also on is that 40% of the of the new built areas is socially built. So there is also more rental houses that is affordable to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. So those were all the opening statements. Once again, who would like to respond? Ida.
Well, then I'll start again. Yes, I have a question for D66. Because you were saying also, STIP finds it important also because we don't have a lot of space, that we use our space efficiently. And so we tried to make it possible again to live together, or that people can live together, students can live together in a house so that it is being used most efficiently. But in the municipality there was not a lot of other parties that agreed on that. So we provided a compromise to make it possible to live together with 3 people. So I was also wondering, why isn't that something that D66 supports?
Yeah, indeed, we do not support it for now. We do, however, think that when the housing crisis is a bit more under control, this should be allowed again. Quite simply because where you make choice for one group, you're implicitly making a choice for another group. So where you're saying this house is for student use, means that another family that has lived all their life in Delft cannot now stay in Delft. There are really choices in this, and if there would be enough houses, of course, students can live in houses with 4, 5, 6, whatever amount of people. However, right now, we also have to think about families, and also if you, after your studies, want to stay and live in Delft, you need to have a house, and if all houses are taken by students, that's simply not possible.
As long as the scarcity stays as bad as it currently is, all decisions that we make are painful decisions, because you're always excluding one group over another. And that will stay like that until we finally have enough houses again.
So what I hear, it's about prioritizing, and then in that way, for you guys, student housing, making it possible in the existing houses is less a prioritization. Prioritization, is that a word?
Yes, and that's why we want to build more student houses.
And okay, so then I have another question, because you say you want to build more student houses, but in the last 4 years, how often did D66 actually propose or file a motion that had something to do with student housing.
I don't know that by heart. I'm new young blood, hopefully going into the City Council. So as a student that really wants to be able to still live in Delft after I finish my master's, this is definitely a topic I want to pick up, and I hope to work with you together on this.
Yeah, because it's good to hear, because the last 4 years there were 0 motions filed by D66 on student housing, and I hear them saying, yes, once the scarcity is over, this will be something that will pick up again. But if you see, the housing crisis is so hard and difficult to really fix. So I hope there'll be other solutions that D66 will think of, because I don't think that will be over quite soon.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a little sneaky way of saying it as if we don't do anything. We are in the governing body of the city, and that's one of the ways in which you can really affect what is happening in the city. And also, I do agree, student housing is really top of mind right now for us, but also we have to think about other groups in this city, including starters, including young families, and just adding more and more students into, for example, the city center will not make it more livable for those groups as well. So we have to really think about it and share this space with each other.
Thank you. While reading your election programs, I saw that most of you want to focus on building on campus. And I think that building on campus is a very good idea, since there's place and people want to live on campus. But at the same time, I also think it is almost vital for a city to have mixed areas. And something we talk about is postcode discrimination, where you can see on somebody's postal code how much they earn in what kind of house they're living. Wouldn't you agree with me that it's also very important to mix students, mix elder people, mix people that live in social housing, but also more highly paid housing, to mix all of those together?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, in our program, it's even written that what we would like to do on the university's space is not only build student housing, but also normal houses and different facilities, but also, for example, on the ski-oevers, make a mix of it. So all the neighbors are mixed places.
Yeah, and I saw that in your program, but STIP and D66 quite clearly we're talking about student housing on campus.
Yeah,
and I think mixing is very important.
I think maybe I'm sorry to say, but maybe read it again, because we say we do really want to mix. We really want to have mixed living in the city, but with a focus on more student capacity on campus. So I've seen great examples of students living in next to elderly, living next to younger families, and that can be great. But there are so much more students now coming to Delft, needing to find a house, that just mixing it up in the city is not enough. We need to do more, and just mixing will not do that reasonably. We need to add more houses, and living on campus has its benefits. I used to live above an older woman. We could not have parties until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because you need to be reasonable and think about our neighbors. But in the house where I live right now, there are often parties, and that's nice. But there are also disadvantages in mixing it up that you need to take into account.
I think another way of trying to make a solution of this problem is to redesign 7% of empty offices in Delft. And one example is SHS, that are doing amazing work, and many of my friends actually live together with elderly people at, I think, about a Bloed is it called?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a way that 7% of empty offices in Delft to look at.
The problem though is, like, I really admire everything SIS is doing, but in Delft, there's not a lot of office space that is empty because they've also looked around, and so they're now looking into Rijswijk. But I do really agree on you with the mixing. If we get the TU Delft so far as also making houses that are not for students on campus, I'd be a huge fan. I think there'd be also much more things to do, maybe more supermarkets. But I think it will be quite difficult, but I'll be up for the lobby for that, for sure. Yeah.
Sounds good.
I do want to quickly address the elephant in the room, and that is mixing goes very well in a lot of areas. There are also a few areas where it's leading to very, very bad circumstances for the people living there. And because of that, that's also one of the reasons to maybe prefer building on campus, because in some areas the balance is totally gone. So for us there is also focus on campus just because some areas, some neighborhoods have not only a lot of students there, but a lot of students that also don't care about their neighbors. And then that can lead to issues that I do want to acknowledge here and not deny that they exist.
Yeah, I have a question. So in your program it says build on campus and around campus, and I'm also a bit curious, how far does that go then? Is it really just campus and then maybe, well, gele scheikunde would have been perfect, so that's the building opposite of bouwkunde, but that's already being transformed. But do you also think that Schiehoevers is still a good idea? Or maybe the Reinier de Graaf area, which was being rebuilt, do you think, oh no, we shouldn't do it there because we should just focus it around campus? Where's your barrier?
Well, it should be reasonable and it should make sense for the area with the current balance in those areas.
Yeah, but if there's a huge shortage, shouldn't you, at least everywhere that you are transforming a neighborhood, also think about student housing? So now it's not possible to do like verkameren. So if you don't specifically make student housing there, there'll just be no students living there, whilst the shortage is only getting bigger and bigger.
But the shortage is big on every level. The shortage is also big for starters. It's also big for families, also big for...
So for the VVD, it is really campus, and so not every neighborhood.
The focus is on the campus and the surrounding area for the building of new student housing, plus collaborations with other municipalities to make sure that we can build the correct volume and ensure that there's housing.
Okay, so we see that differently then. Yeah.
I really wanted to add on to this, that I have to say that there are indeed some student houses that are causing trouble in the city, that are actually really annoying to their neighbors. But there are way many more students that live in the city, that really add on to the city, that really make it a more livable area, that are able to help the elderly in their street, for example, to do groceries, or now during COVID times there were a lot of students that actually added on to it. So I don't think it's fair to just say students are a problem and we should move them all to the campus.
Which was also not what I said, and we still have a lot of houses throughout the city which should also remain there and are in the correct place there. But we should make integral decisions concerning the whole balance of the entire city.
I have another question for the VVD. In Delft we have I think almost or over 50% of social housing, and the VVD wants to decrease that to 30%.
Yeah, no.
Please explain.
Yes, I'll explain it. We don't want to reduce anything, because reducing it in absolute numbers would mean we're tearing out houses and then the people have nowhere to live, which of course does not make sense. So we don't want that. What we do want is that in new building plans, we build more in the higher segments. The reason for that is quite complicated, and it has to do with how we're funded from the national government. If you build more expensive houses, very often that also has an effect, because social housing often also comes with expenses, either for types of medical care or other issues. If we build more in a higher segment, it means we have relatively more tax available for us, which also means we can take better care for the care duties that we already have because of the increase in fiscal income. So we're not bringing anybody out of the city. We're making sure we have more funds available to take on the care tasks that we already have. And we're bringing our city in what's more of a balance when you compare it to other cities throughout.
I'm sorry, but in the current financial housing crisis we're talking about, you see that almost nobody can enter into a middle or high class house anymore. If you are a starter, you can't afford it. So how do you make then Delft still accessible?
Yeah, so not against building social housing, but when you see at our surrounding municipalities, they have way lower percentages of social housing. And we think that our surrounding municipalities should take their responsibility there and help out by building more in these segments so that these people for these segments also have a place to live. But if I look at the current situation in Delft...
So in this way you say, okay, if you're young and after studies, you can move to the cities around us in the hope that they will build enough housing.
Well, it's not in the hope. We should make good agreements with these other municipalities to ensure that these houses are being built there. But Rijswijk is a couple of minutes by bike. Delft-Gouw is nearby. And it makes more sense if you want to achieve a balanced city to have these municipalities to take on this role.
And also to add on to this, it's not about making people move out of the city. We want to still increase the amount of social housing in Delft, but at a lower rate of increase, as technical students might understand, a lower rate of increase than the middle or higher segment of the housing prices. Which means, right now we are at a 44%, it's almost 50, but it's 44% of social housing, which is really a lot compared to other cities. Right now in Delft, if you are a student and you are done graduating and you want to live in Delft, that's simply not possible, not just because the housing prices are so high, but also because there are no middle segment houses in Delft. And you say that middle and higher segment houses, those are too expensive. No, higher segment houses are too expensive, and there are not enough middle segment houses.
With the current financial, but with the current housing crisis, also the middle class houses are too expensive.
But should we then build more of these middle class houses so that there'll be more availability, so that they'll be more accessible? Or
and what we were talking about is not middle is not like 2,000 euros. Middle is like between something like 900 and 1,200 euros or something, like in that range.
That which was, is still, but it is not now. It's not built.
It is, but it is, and also those are the facts and figures that the Central Bureau of Statistics uses. We really need to not only focus on building more social housing, but more in the middle segment. There are a lot of people in Delft that in Dutch we would call it scheefwoners, or scheefhuurders. Those are people that earn too much money to be able to fall in the category of social housing. Those people can and want to move up to middle segment housing. There are people, elderly people that live in a big house that can house families up to 4, 5, 6 people, but keep on living there simply because there are no available middle houses in Delft available. So by building that, we can move people into the right home that fits them, houses for elderly, houses for starters, houses for young people. And also, by doing so, we make social houses, again, available for people that actually need them.
But we built the last 5 years in the spoorzone, in a lot of places in Delft. We built a lot of houses, all in the middle and high class. And still we have a housing problem. And you see the prices of all the houses you can buy going up, which means that even if it starts as a middle class house, the price is going up. It's really going crazy. So it means we need more social housing to give the opportunity to more people to enter into. Can I make my point? I give you also the space. So we really need to give to make more social housing to make sure that everybody can enter also into the next step of their housing phase.
I agree with you on the fact that we need more housing for people that fit them. But if that is social housing, yes, we should need to build more social housing, but right now that simply is not the case. The reason why the middle segment housing and the higher segment housing prices are through the roof right now is simply because there are not enough of them. There are people that are able to afford middle segment houses that are still living in social housing. Those need to first find a job, first find a house that fits them, and then we can move them up.
So we still
and there are
have a
more
gap.
social houses available for people in lower incomes. I think this is not a disagreement on which who gets a house here, but I think it's a disagreement on who lives where, and those are just facts and figures which you can look up.
Yeah, I want to underline everything that Brandon just said. It's also how we look at this issue.
Okay. I think it's time for questions in the room. See one in the back, straight away, red jumper. Yeah, he's waving, box coming.
All right, okay. I would like to hear your thoughts about rent control or like control of landlords, private landlords. To put a bit of context into that, I was lucky to find the shared house with the facilities that you mentioned before. But at the same time, I'm paying 600 euros to have a shared bathroom with 7 people, which doesn't make sense in my opinion. And I was told that you could technically file a complaint to the municipality because that shouldn't be the case. But the landlord already was allowed to ask for that amount of money. So what would be your thoughts? How more control should we enforce on this?
I have a question, it's quite specific, but are you living under a contract where you pay like directly to your landlord, or do you pay to someone who you live with and they pay to your landlord?
Well, the house gathers the money, and then there is one person that sends it to the landlord. And actually not to the landlord, but to the agency that the landlord wanted.
Yeah, so that is actually very unfair. I live in a house that myself as well. This is called a paraplu contract. It's quite new. And also the woonbond, so it's like association.
Yeah, the living union.
Living union. They also see that this is a problem because normally you have a point system. If you there's a maximum amount of money that you can pay for your room if you pay it. And then you get points for if you have a bathroom, you get points for if you have a kitchen or how big it is. But because you pay directly to this one person, the point system doesn't count. And that is indeed a problem that we need to address, but it's quite hard because it's something that is regulated on a national level. But something that STIP did, well, we try to accomplish it, or the motion, we filed a motion for this, is a hiring team. So that if you do have problems regarding your landlord, that you can also go to the municipality so that they can help you. But in the financial state that we're in now, this is something that we couldn't get through, but this will be one of our goals also for the next 4 years. But I also hope that on like a national level they'll fix this problem, because this is just not fair. Yeah.
Short follow-up?
Yeah. Yeah, but if I think your house is above a certain like square meters or a certain price already, the point system doesn't count anymore. So the investors, in a way, they found a loophole to get more money, and yeah, that's sad, but the truth. So I think that is a problem. I think Delta also did an article about this, but I think we should also find out how big this problem actually is, because I'm hearing this more and more. And if this is a problem that like a lot of students struggle with, this might be something that we have to maybe take nationally as well. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
another question.
And, well, maybe something I could add in the documentary No Internationals Allowed. They were also talking about this direct legal firm that helps international students in Groningen, which would be something we cannot provide maybe as a gemeente, but we can help starting and attracting someone like that.
We do already kind of have that in some sort of way, but STIP and I think also GroenLinks has it in their program together with us. We want to have these huurteams, teams of specialists that are able to help you with any question about rent. For my brother, for example, he was kind of rudely kicked out of his house. So this is actually the reason why it became very relevant to me and also for our party. But there are many of these awful stories of people just profiting from the vulnerable position students are in, and especially international students.
Yeah, would this also be focused on international students, or?
No, not focused on international students, but I think that there is a great responsibility in making it as accessible to international students as for Dutch students.
I'd love to work together with
the good thing is that like last period, this already came through, so it was already voted for. But now, so I think next period, these steps will be taken, yeah.
There's time for one final question. Okay, there's one person who really wants to ask a question.
So we just Googled and found this research that 80% of people in Delft are happy with their home, and that only 7.9% of the people are living maybe in social housing and have a higher income. So I find your point a little bit weird to go for middle class and high class housing when maybe only 7.9% of the whole population of Delft needs it. So, D66 why?
Then I think we have different facts and figures, because there are actually a lot of elderly that not per se need middle class housing, but need elderly homes. And also, I still think that 6 or 7% is quite a lot, and there are a lot of people, students. There are a lot of students in Delft that move away from Delft just because they can't live here. So I think those facts and figures might be a bit skewed to people that are able to find a home, which actually might prove my point that there is too little housing.
And on that note, I'm afraid we have to finish it due to the closing times. I believe Amy would like to. Hello,
Does it work? It works, right?
It works.
So I want to thank everyone for attending to our municipality debate night about the elections, and I hope you guys now know a bit better what you want to vote for. So thank you all for coming, and we also want to thank all of you, because without you we couldn't be able to make this debate reality. So I want to ask everyone from the board, so Yassir, can you please come on the stage, and Julian also. Then we can hand some gifts to you, and we have some quite interesting plants. They are oxygen renewing your room, so they are actually useful and really nice. You guys can give them. Go to front.
Thank you very much.
So this is the only plant I did not let it die.
You're not allowed to let it die.
No, I have a lot of plants, but this is the only one I did not kill, so it's a great plant to have.
So if you guys want to chat to anybody, you have about 5 minutes to do that, because then the building closes. So thank you all for coming, and good luck with voting.
Wat is jammer daar dus niet.
I keep holding on